Good afternoon, everyone. This is Steve Smith. I'm a SCORE business advisor, and welcome to today's webinar. I can see by the people who have signed up that some of you have been on these webinars before, so just bear with me a little bit as I get started and introduce our speaker. But as you know, today's subject is crowdfunding. Is it right for your business? And our presenter is Cliff Ennico. Many of you know Cliff. And or have seen him in workshops. He's published, he's written a lot of things, and I'm sure that many of you know him. As he just told me a little minute ago, he's a legend in his own mind. So before we get to Cliff's presentation, let me do the obligatory and give you some information, background information for those of you that don't know about SCORE. SCORE is a national organization, was founded in the mid-'60s as a part of the government's Small Business Administration, specifically to help small businesses get started and to flourish. There are about 320 some odd offices around the country, and the office that you're most directly associated with here today is SCORE in Norwalk, Connecticut. SCORE Norwalk has about 100 to 110 volunteers. About two-thirds of us, including myself, are retired executives with industry or process or business subject expertise. And we offer three primary value-add services to small businesses. First, we do have the individual counseling, which we do either in our offices in Norwalk or at a site that fits your individual needs on a day-to-day basis, like a coffee shop or a diner or something like that. In those one-on-one sessions, we will actually work with you to do such things as develop your business plan, develop a marketing plan, measure your success, build your financial plan, et cetera, et cetera. So that's face-to-face counseling. We also have a series of workshops. I think this year around Fairfield County we'll probably do 150 some odd workshops. They're primarily done at libraries throughout the county, and usually one or two a week, as you would imagine. In those workshops, we try to bring subjects to bear like the one we're talking about today, that are topical and will help you run your business more efficiently and effectively. A different kind of a venue, obviously, than the face-to-face counseling. At the beginning of the year, this year, 2016, we started the webinar program, of which you're now a part. And we are running those webinars every month on the first Tuesday of the month, like today. And we're going to start the second half, or the last trimester of the year, to move to one every 3 weeks, and probably we'll even accelerate that as we go into 2017. So let me just also put in a plug now for our next webinar, which is July 12th. Seems like a long way away, but it's not. And at that webinar, we'll have one of SCORE's own, Budley Freund, will present basic tech trends. So we'll look forward to that. Now, let's get on with it here. Today's webinar will go till 1 o'clock sharp. The conference is being recorded. I always get questions on this. Yes, it is being recorded. And the link will be to the recording, and the slides will be available at, so write this down, scorefairfieldcounty.org, no spaces, no caps. It'll be there within the next week for you to access as you see fit. Also, if you look at your screen, at the bottom left-hand side, you'll see a chat room. That's where we encourage you to place your questions, and I'll monitor those. And when we get through Cliff's presentation, I'll go through those questions and feed them to him in some kind of an order that makes sense, and we'll hopefully answer as many as we can. So that's pretty much it. Let me just introduce Cliff. He's a leading expert on legal and tax issues that face small businesses. He's the author of 16 books, including most recently, that couldn't be more topical, the Crowdfunding Handbook. Raise money for your small business or startup with equity funding portals. It's quite a title. I'm sure he's going to give it a plug here when he gets on. He is an attorney for small businesses and a consultant. He's based in Fairfield County. He's helped over 15,000 businesses in the last 35 years. That's a 35-year career, and he's quite a great asset for us at SCORE, and we really appreciate the time that he gives us and he gives to you. So, Cliff, I'm going to turn it over to you now and take it away, and then I'll be back whenever you need me, or for sure when you're finished with your slides. Cliff, to you.
Hey, Stephen. Thanks you for that wonderful introduction. First of all, congratulations to everybody on this call, and a personal thank you for taking your time out on just was turning out to be a lovely early summer day to spend an hour of your life listening to a lawyer talk about something new. Most of the talks that I give for SCORE, and I can see just from the name some of you people have heard me speak before for SCORE, most of the things I talk about are basic how-to things on how to handle certain legal and tax issues that have been around forever. This is something a little bit different. This is something brand new. On May 16th, about 2.5 weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, the federal government made what are probably some of the biggest changes in securities law in the last 80 years, since the Great Depression and FDR's New Deal. And one thing especially is very, very exciting, which is this new thing called equity crowdfunding. What we're going to be doing in the next hour, I'm going to be sort of telling you what this is, what it isn't, and sort of give you my sense of who I think will benefit from it. But my personal prediction is that give this a couple of years, and in 3 to 5 years, this is going to be the way that most startup and early stage companies raise capital for their operations. This is going to totally transform the venture capital industry as we know it. I'm very, very excited about this, and that is why I wrote the new book, which is called the Crowdfunding Handbook, basically telling people how to do one of these. It's the first book out in the market that tells people how to do it. You're going to be seeing a lot of them coming out in the next few months. So let's get started. First of all, if you ever doubted that I was an attorney, here's the slide that proves it. We always tell you what we're not going to do before we do anything. Obviously, I am not a SCORE employee. I am not a SCORE counselor. Anything I say, I'm fully responsible for. But also, too, and this is in all my programs, I am going to talk about some legal and tax stuff. I'm going to try to answer at the end of this program. I'm sure some of you have questions about this. I'm going to be, I'll try to give you the best answers I can. But there's a very big difference between giving legal information and legal advice. I'm not in a position to tell any of you what you should do. For me to do that, I'm going to have to get to know you a little better, find out a little bit more about your company, what you do, and quite frankly, I'm going to want to charge for that. So just be careful. If I do say something here that sounds like a good idea and you rely on it and you do it and it doesn't work out, you end up getting sued, you file for bankruptcy, your spouse divorces you, your dog pees on your leg, and basically you end up living in a diaper box under the Brooklyn Bridge. It's not my fault. You cannot rely on anything I say here as one-on-one advice. It's just general information about how crowdfunding works. So let's talk about crowdfunding. What does that term mean? It's been around now for about a decade, since the advent of social media in the early aughts. No sooner did Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and those sites get off the ground than we started seeing crowdfunding sites crop up. Basically, crowdfunding is just what the name implies. It's raising money from the masses, from the general crowd of people, the public, the hoi polloi. That is what it's all about. Casting your bread upon the waters and hoping that some fish are biting that day. Believe it or not, crowdfunding is not new. The very first crowdfunded offering was actually dates back to 1884, 1885. When the Statue of Liberty was being built in New York City Harbor. The French, of course, supplied the statue, but the deal was that the governments of New York City and New York State would raise the money for the pedestal, the base of the Statue of Liberty, the thing that takes you forever to climb up before you get to the statue itself. The state and city governments basically started raising money for this, but then they ran out of money. So the New York World, which was a popular newspaper of the time, it's now long since out of business, basically said, this is ridiculous, this is a shame on our national pride, we want to have this statue in New York Harbor. So they basically took out a full-page ad asking individual people to give dimes, dollars, whatever, so that they could finish the pedestal for the Statue of Liberty. And they did. They raised a couple of $100,000 in 1885. That's like raising $10, $15, $20 million today to build the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. That was the first ever crowd-funded pitch that was ever done. Little piece of history there. Fast forward to the early aughts, we started seeing crowdfunding websites crop up. The two most popular are Kickstarter.com and Indiegogo.com. You'll see the URLs there on my slide. Right now, up until now, if you were doing crowdfunding, you weren't crowdfunding a company or a startup. You were crowdfunding a project. And a project could take many different forms. A lot of inventors have been using crowdfunding to raise money for their inventions. What they do is, they basically put a pitch out here. I've got a new kind of spork. You know what a spork is? That's the thing. That's that combination fork and spoon thing that you use to eat salad. An inventor could come out and say, hey, I got a brand new spork. It's a knife, fork, and spoon, and you need both hands to operate it, but it's really cool. You could basically pitch that to the crowd, and people would basically give you money in exchange for something, and the something could take different forms. So for example, what you do on crowdfunding is you launch a campaign. You basically put something out there and say, hey, here's the project, I'm raising money for it. People then contribute money, and you promise them something in return for their contribution. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to crowdfund my next book. I want to take 3 to 6 months off from work to write my new book. I got to pay bills during that time, so I'm crowdfunding the next 3 to 6 months of my life. I want you guys all to pay my household bills for the next 3 to 6 months so that I can take the time off and write the next blockbuster bestseller on how to do whatever. And for a $100 donation, you'll get an autographed copy of the book when it comes out. For a $500 donation, I will invite you to the launch party that my publisher does in New York. And for $1,000 or more, I'll come over and I'll watch your kids some night, so you can go have a date night or something like that. I mean, that's what a crowdfunding campaign looks like, circa right up from about 2004 to the present time. A lot of people, by the way, if you go to Kickstarter, there are a lot of people that are looking to crowdfund medical procedures that are not covered by insurance. A lot of couples, for example, taking fertility treatments try to crowdfund. I actually saw one a couple of years ago where a couple somewhere out in the Midwest was having trouble conceiving a baby. They wanted to crowdfund artificial insemination, and the deal was that if you contributed at least X dollars, you would get the right to name the baby when it was born. They gave a list of boys and girls' names, and depending on what happened, you would have the ability to pick the child's name. I thought that was kind of clever, actually. So basically, the way you crowdfund things today is you launch a campaign on a crowdfunding portal, such as Kickstarter or Indiegogo. There's a bunch of them out there. You try to raise money, and the deal is there's a trigger amount. If you raise at least X dollars by a certain date, then you get the money and you get to do whatever you want to do. But keep in mind that you have to give something to those people in exchange if the project is successful. Okay. In project crowdfunding, which is what we're talking about, the investor gets something in return eventually, but it doesn't have to. You don't have to give something in return. There is something called gift crowdfunding. A lot of nonprofits use crowdfunding as a way to raise money for their various exempt activities. Here, you're not getting anything in return; you're just getting a warm, fuzzy feeling. And if the nonprofit is a true 501c3 tax-exempt organization, you may be able to get a deduction for your donation to the organization. But now, beginning May 16th of this year, we have a third category, and this is what we're going to talk about in this program. It's called equity crowdfunding, raising money for your business and offering stock or debt in return in exchange for their investments. People actually getting a piece of your company through crowdfunding. So now let's talk a little bit about the law here. Raising capital online. This is really what equity crowdfunding is all about. It's a major transformation. Historically, you couldn't do it without making a public offering. The only way that you could raise money from the masses, from the public, the hoi polloi, the general mass of humanity, was to make a public offering under something called an IPO, basically, under the Securities Act of 1933. You could not do it. There were SEC rules and state laws that allowed private offerings to specific individuals that didn't require you to go through the whole IPO process, but they were limited. Generally, you were limited to small numbers of investors in dollar amounts. So, for example, under Connecticut's old Blue Sky Law, if you had more than 10 investors from anywhere, not just from the state of Connecticut, but if you made a pitch and you took money from more than 10 people, you had to file an offering statement similar to a prospectus with the Connecticut Department of Banking. And every state had a law like that, that limited you as to how much money you could raise. Also, too, only accredited investors could participate. Now, we'll talk more about accredited investors in a minute, but basically you couldn't take money from just anybody. There were only very specific people that you could take money from. And then last but not least, you couldn't use general solicitation or general advertising to promote your offering. And I have had personal experience with this, probably more than just about anybody you will ever find in the legal world. Most people who know me know that back in the early 90s, I did a television show on public television called Money Hunt. It was the very first Shark Tank type show for entrepreneurs. I had a partner, a local venture capitalist, and he and I basically traveled around the country, kind of like Antiques Roadshow. We would find somebody with a crazy startup company, and we would basically bring them on the show and basically walk through their business plan, just like they do on Shark Tank. Very much. We were doing this, 25 years ago. And one of our biggest frustrations in doing that show was that federal law prohibited our guests from talking about their offerings and how much they were looking to raise. They could certainly talk about their company. They could talk about their products, their services, the market, the competition, all the stuff you put in a business plan, but they couldn't say, we're looking to raise $250,000 and we're looking to sell 10% of our company in exchange for that. If they made that statement on TV, that was considered a general solicitation or general advertising, and it totally blew their private offering exemption with the SEC. I cannot tell you how many hours I spent on the phone with SEC people back then, trying to get a feeler for how far we could push that, But I will tell you, whenever we did a taping of Money Hunt back in the 90s, inevitably, at least once or twice during a shoot, a guest would blurt out, "We're looking to raise 20%. We're looking to sell 20% of our company in exchange for $1 million." The minute they opened their mouth and said that, we had to stop the tape. Everything came to a screeching halt. The flow was broken, and basically we had to go and rewind. Everybody had to take a break, because these were union employees. Everything just came to a screeching halt while I basically took the guest out into the green room and basically yelled at him, saying, "You can't do that. You can't talk about this. It violates federal law, yada, yada." So I feel this. I feel the pain here of not being able to use general solicitation, general advertising to be able to make a private offering of securities. Let's talk a little bit about an accredited investor. What's an accredited investor? It's a concept you're going to hear come up a lot in this presentation. Well, it's probably not you. Forgive the smiley face. Basically, an accredited investor is someone who's either wealthy enough or sophisticated enough that they don't need the protection of the federal securities laws. The federal securities laws are basically consumer protection laws. Their job is to protect helpless people, Clem Kadiddlehopper, from nowhere, New Jersey, from losing his life savings to an unscrupulous stock promoter. That's what they're designed to protect against. So an accredited investor is somebody who doesn't need that protection, someone who knows what they're doing. So banks, venture capital firms, other institutional investors are all considered accredited investors. The company founders and insiders, the people who found the company, are generally considered accredited because, let's face it, they're living at that company. They're working 90 hours a week. They know more about this company than anybody else. Okay, wealthy individuals, otherwise known people we call the 1% nowadays. In order to be an accredited investor as an individual, you have to have a net worth, alone or with your spouse, of $1 million or more. Or you have to have an individual income of 200. That should be, by the way, that should be 200,000. I apologize. That's not $200. Most of us with incomes of $200 are not accredited investors. That should be 200,000 or more in the last 2 years, or with a joint income, that's you and your spouse together, of 300,000 more in the last 2 years, and a reasonable expectation that those numbers will continue. So if you've been making, $250,000 a year the last 3 years, but you just lost your job, and it isn't likely that you're going to be getting a new job at that income level this year, you are not an accredited investor, even though you have been for the last couple of years of your life. If anybody here on this conversation meets any of these criteria, I definitely want to have a conversation with you, and I'm going to want to know if you are single. So I'm only kidding, of course, about that. Anyway, so traditionally, that was the deal. If you wanted to sell stock to the masses, you had to do it with an IPO or a private offering, and the rules for private offerings were just very, very stringent. So fast forward now to April 2012, President Obama signs a federal law called the Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act of 2012. Note the acronym, JOBS. Whenever Congress gives a law a funny name, it's always a good idea to look at the acronym because that tells you what they're looking at. This was widely viewed as an effort to create jobs. The federal government recognizes that big companies these days are not the job-creating machines that they used to be. It's our small businesses and startup companies that are going to create the jobs of the future, and we want to do everything we possibly can to help these companies create capital and create pools of capital to get their businesses off the ground, but not in a way that's going to cheat investors and to cheat common people out of their life savings. So what the Jobs Act did was it handed off to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the mandate to create rules, and it did a bunch of things. Okay, there were 6 titles to the Jobs Act. I talk about all of them in my crowdfunding handbook, but there are 3 that were especially important. Title II of the Act did away with the whole general solicitation and advertising prohibition. What Title II does, it says basically you can have a private offering and you can pitch that offering using general solicitation and general advertising. You can go on Oprah or any TV show that you like and talk about your offering. That prohibition was taken away, and as long as you only accept money from accredited investors, those rich and sophisticated people we talked about in the previous slide, as long as you only took money from those people, it didn't matter how you reached them. So you could advertise on TV, you could get 1 million inquiries about your company, and as long as you only admit the rich and sophisticated folks, you can do that under Title II. Okay, now Title III is what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the presentation. It basically allowed startup and early stage companies to raise capital from the masses via crowdfunding portals. And we're going to talk about specifically what those are, but Kickstarter, Indiegogo, those are examples of crowdfunding portals. You could list a campaign on these crowdfunding portals, but not all portals, only some of them, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and raise money from these folks. That's Title III. and that's equity crowdfunding is Title III. Then Title IV, there's been something in the SEC world for a long time called Regulation A. This is a streamlined IPO process. It enables you to do a public offering, but without going through all the heavy paperwork requirements and massive costs that an IPA is involved in. They basically liberalize the Regulation A rules to make it easier for companies to raise between $3 and $20 million. Those were the big three things that the Jobs Act did, and most importantly, it preempted regulation at the state level. Up until this point, if you wanted to do an offering of securities, sell a piece of your company to the public, you not only had the federal rules to deal with, but you also had the blue sky laws in each state. What the Jobs Act did was it preempted those. It said if you're making an offering under Title II, III, or IV, you don't have to worry at all about state regulation and having to do different prospectuses for different states the way you used to do. It was a massive liberalization of the law. So now let's focus on Title III. That's really what I want to focus on. Title II, Title IV are really for big offerings. Title III is for the little people, the little companies that are just getting started, and so a perfect target for a SCORE audience, a perfect topic for a SCORE audience. Basically, what Title III does, it takes the friends and family offering to a new level. Now, back in days past, whenever you started a company off, you basically had three levels of funding. Level one was the founders. The founders would put in their money, hit up their credit cards, max out their credit cards, do whatever they could to get that key few $1,000s or tens of thousands of dollars necessary to get the product launched, the company up and running. The second level, once the company was launched, and then and like all early stage companies, they were hungry for capital, the founders would then reach out to their friends and family for either loans or equity investments to help get the company to the next level. And then the third level of financing was what we call the angel round, where an offering would be made to wealthy individuals who were not friends and family, but who were accredited investors and who could put in, instead of $10,000, $15,000, they could put in $100,000, $200,000, and this was the capital that got the company on the venture capitalist radar screen. Those are historically the three tiers of investment that got a startup company off the ground. Title III is all about the friends and family offering. What Title III basically allows you to do is to offer shares to the public, via specialized gatekeepers called crowdfunding portals. You can't do these from your own website. You have to go through something called a crowdfunding portal. We'll talk about those in a minute. There's little or no regulation at the state level. Issuers can raise up to $1 million over a rolling 12-month period, although there are some rules you have to know, and people other than accredited investors can participate. You are not limited to taking money from accredited investors the way you used to and the way you do under Title II. The only thing is, though, there are limits. If someone other than an accredited investor is making an investment in your company, they're limited. They can only invest if their net worth and annual income are both less than $100,000, they can only invest $2,000 or 5% of their net worth, whichever is greater, in crowdfunded offerings each year, not just yours, all crowdfunded offerings. If their income or net worth is less than $100,000. If their net worth and annual income is over $100,000, they can invest up to 10% of their net worth or annual income, whichever is less, in crowdfunded offerings, and nobody can invest more than $100,000 in crowdfunded offerings. Those are the three limits on people other than accredited investors. If you're an accredited investor, you can do whatever the heck you want. But if you're not, these are the rules that you have to comply with. Okay, so where do things stand? So what happened with Title III? The SEC regulations for Title III went into effect on May 16th, and here's where we stand as of this point. 10 broker-dealers and 40 independent firms have registered with the SEC to become portals. I understand that number is a little higher now. They're up over 50 firms have registered with the SEC to become portals. In order to become a portal, however, you have to register not just with the SEC but also with FINRA, the financial. That's the agency that regulates banks. and other financial institutions. And that process is a bit slower. They've only approved about 5 or 6 of those 50 applications so far. It's a very slow and tedious process, but it is happening. There are a number of popular crowdfunding portals that have signed up for this. AngelList.com and SeedInvest.com, which is based in New York City, are in. They have registered with the SEC, and they are beginning to do Title III crowdfunded offerings. Kickstarter.com, in a recent Wall Street Journal article, said that they don't plan to participate in this market. They want to stick with the traditional project-type crowdfunding. The crowdfunding for projects, not offering stock in companies, although they may change. Indiegogo has said that they're on the fence. They're looking at it as a possibility, as a possible way of enhancing their current crowdfunded offerings. My personal prediction for Indiegogo is that they're going to wait and see how this, and actually not just Indiegogo, but a lot of the big crowdfunding portals, they're going to wait and see how this market develops. And if they see it as an opportunity, what they're going to do is they're going to go out and acquire one of the smaller crowdfunded portals that were set up to do this, the Title III offerings. As happens in a lot of industries, when a new industry first is born, there's a lot of players running around, but eventually a lot of them get scarfed up, a lot of them get swallowed up, and there's consolidation. I think you're going to see that in the crowdfunded portal business as well. I mean, I actually know of a couple of portal startups that are registering with the SEC specifically in the hope that they will be acquired by a bigger crowdfunding portal down the road. They're looking to get swallowed up because they want to be one of the big players in this industry. There is another crowdfunded portal called Circle Up, or Circle Up Network, sometimes called Circle Network. They're not planning to participate. Again, I think these companies are just taking a wait-and-see attitude. If the market develops, they will jump in by buying one of the smaller portals that are being registered now. Okay, so who's going to take advantage of this? Believe it or not, I don't really see this as being a major thing for tech startups, at least right now. At least right now. This is going to change. I do believe that in 5-10 years, this is how early-stage companies are going to do their venture capital and get their initial investments. I really do believe that. I am a little bit of an evangelist for equity crowdfunding, but I think it's going to take a while to get there. And the reason is people like me, lawyers, advisors, financial advisors, people on the board of advisors of a startup company are probably going to say to their clients, hold off for a bit, because if you do a crowdfunded offering, if you sell your stock to the masses and you end up with 50 or 100 or 500 shareholders, that really is going to prohibit you from getting the bigger investments from accredited investors down the road. And I think they're right about that. I represent quite a few angel investors, and I don't know a single angel investor that will invest in a company that has 30 or more shareholders already in place. There's a real bias against that in the angel community. And I think if they're going to look at a crowdfunded company as having too many players on the field. So I think at least in the beginning, the tech startups are going to hang back on this. They're not going to just leap in. But there are some exceptions to that. Here are the 3 companies that I think will benefit the most from Title III equity crowdfunding. Concept companies. A concept company is a company that's just getting off the ground. Mo, Larry, and Curly are in their garage, and they're trying to get this prototype developed and launched, whatever it is they're looking to do. This is a company that right now just has an idea, maybe a few drawings, and what they're looking for is they're looking for capital to do 3 things: to build a prototype, get it patented, or copyrighted or otherwise protected as intellectual property, and then do the market research to find out if the customers are going to be there. Generally speaking, these companies are not looking for large sums of capital. They're looking for anywhere from $25,000 to $250,000. Which is at the low range of what you can do via crowdfunding. And I think they're the ones, these are companies that by definition are not on the venture capitalist radar screens as yet. They want to get there, and I think they're going to see crowdfunding as a way to get that initial capital to get, again, just the same as friends and family offerings. Any company that's at the stage where they're looking at for friends and family money are going to be looking at Title III crowdfunding as an alternative. But I think the most exciting potential market here are small businesses in the retail and service sector. These are companies that historically have never been able to get venture capital. Why? Because they're not scalable. These are non-scalable service businesses. Restaurants, even famous restaurants cannot get venture capital. They have to rely on bank loans or SBA loans. And anybody who has ever been through an SBA loan knows how painful that process is. I just did a closing for one of my clients of an SBA loan in New Jersey, and at the end of the day, the client, he was only borrowing about $300,000, but he had to sign over 100 different documents in order to get that money from a bank. If you've ever been through an SBA loan, it's like having a triple root canal without Novocaine. The interest rates are higher than they normally are. The founders all have to put up second or third mortgages on their homes. They all have to personally guarantee the loan. And if you're successful, you have all these restrictive covenants that you have to live with, limits on how much you can grow, basically, so that the bank is protected. With crowdfunding, these kinds of people will now have an alternative to bank financing. So let's say, for example, you operate a popular restaurant in Stamford, Connecticut. You're well known locally, not nationally, but you're well known locally. You have a large following. You're always busy on Friday and Saturday nights. And most importantly, you have a following on social media. You have 20, 30,000 likes on Facebook, maybe 10 or 15,000 Twitter followers. You have a following on Instagram. That, to me, is the sweet spot for equity crowdfunding. These companies are going to be very interested in doing crowdfunding. Why? Because it's an alternative to bank financing. No restrictive covenants, no personal guarantees, no need to put a mortgage up on people's houses. You can leverage your popularity on social media to raise money for your company. This second group of companies, I think, is going to be initially the sweet spot for equity crowdfunding. Companies that can't get venture, that have been traditionally locked out of the venture capital world, but that now have a chance to raise money from the public. And then the third category, I call them wowie-zowie companies. That's not a legal term, but basically any company or any project that is cool, that has, that when you hear about it, you say, wow, I would love to get a piece of that. When my book first came out in early May, I sent about 100 copies to friends and family, and I knew at some point I would get a call from somebody saying, hey, I really want to do this. Can you introduce me to a portal? And sure enough, a few days later, the very first call that I got was from an off-Broadway producer, Max Bialystock from The Producers. That was the first guy that called me. Off-Broadway, Broadway shows, anything to do with entertainment, documentary films, anything where there's a wowie-zowie factor. Where somebody can say, well, I put $100 into this, and they can get bragging rights. That's the kind of business that I think initially will be looking at equity crowdfunding. If I'm looking to launch a new Broadway show, that's the kind of thing. Wouldn't you love to be able to tell your friends at parties, hey, I just invested in Cliff Enico's latest Broadway thing? You might want to do that. So this is my prediction. These are the three most likely candidates for equity crowdfunding. Now, there are some people who cannot crowdfund. So, for example, foreign companies are not allowed to use crowdfunding, except Canada. We always make an exception for Canadians because they're just like us. Some of you on the call are probably Canadian. You just don't know it. Public companies cannot participate. Facebook cannot use crowdfunding to launch their latest service. They still have to go the traditional public offering route. Investment companies, hedge funds cannot participate. They really want this to be a pitch to individual investors. Companies with a bad SEC record. LLCs can crowdfund, but I think it's going to be very awkward for them to do so. If you have a startup and you're looking to crowdfund, I think you're going to have to be a corporation, a C corporation, rather than an LLC. That's not 100% sure, certain. LLCs can be set up in such a way that they can crowdfund, but it's just going to be very awkward for them to do so. C corporations that can issue multiple tiers of stock will have a much easier time coming up with crowdfunding. We'll talk about that in a minute. S corporations are not going to be able to crowdfund at all. If you're an S Corp, you're going to have to weigh the advantages of crowdfunding versus losing your S election. Why? Because in most cases, you're going to want to create a second class of stock for the crowdfunded offering, and S corporations cannot have more than one class of stock. Also, S corporations are limited to 100 investors total. That includes the founders. And with crowdfunding, you're going to hit that 100 investor ceiling very, very quickly. So S corps cannot do crowdfunding. Also, blank check or shell companies. If you have a company sitting on a shelf that doesn't have a plan, that's just sitting there saying, oh, next opportunity that comes up, whatever it is, I'll use this corporation for it, you cannot crowdfund a blank check company, a company that does not have a purpose or a business plan. Okay. Preparing for the offering, let's just walk very quickly through the process. You're going to have to pick the right legal entity and place of incorporation. So, for example, you may have to be a Delaware corporation to do one of these, or a Delaware LLC. If you are not a C Corp, you're probably going to have to be taxed as a C Corp in order to do this. Like I said, LLCs can do this, but it's going to be more awkward and more costly for them to do it. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. C Corps will have a much easier time with this. You're going to have to decide on what kind of security you're going to be offering. My recommendation to my clients is going to be you want these shares to be non-voting. If you end up with 500 shareholders in your company, you do not want to have to deal with them every time you need a shareholder approval on something. These should be non-voting securities. People investing in these should be looking for the economic benefit, not the right to tell you how to run your business. I would also recommend that the shares be redeemable. At some point, if you do get a more serious venture capital offering, and if your company qualifies for that, they're going to want you to take out some of your crowdfunded investors, and you have to have the mechanism in place for them to do it. You need to set the offering amount, how much you're looking to raise, and the minimum, what we call min-max. That means that you're going to set a minimum amount and a maximum amount. We're looking to raise between $100,000 and $300,000. And the reason you do that is because these things have a time clock ticking. You can't just do a crowdfunded offering for forever. You have to say, but within the next 6 months, we expect to raise at least $100,000 and not more than $300,000. Because let's say you just set the offering amount at $300,000. Okay, in the next 6 months we're going to try to raise $300,000. If at the end of 6 months you have raised $299,000, the offering terminates and the investors get their money back. Is how it works. You've lost the game. You want to set a minimum amount that you feel comfortable you can reach in a short period of time so you can start glomming the money, and then a maximum amount, which is the best of all possible worlds. That's the amount you hope in your wildest dreams you'll be able to get. Decide on the offering timetable. This is actually very easy. I think the vast majority of these are going to be between 90 and 180 days. Prepare a term sheet, but keep in mind that the term sheet is not for the investors. It's for the portals. And then get your management team on board. Okay. Now let's talk about launching the offering. In Title III crowdfunding, everything happens on a portal. There are two keys to success for a crowdfunded offering. I'll try to simplify this. Key number one is picking the right portal. The second key is leveraging your social media, your following on social media. The companies that don't have a huge following on social media are going to have trouble crowdfunding, at least during the early years. As the market develops, portals will develop a following of their own on social media, and you'll pick your portal based on how many investors they have in their pool. That's going to take a while to develop, though. That's not going to happen overnight. Right now, the companies that are best positioned to do a crowdfunded offering are companies that already have a large social media following and can leverage that. Some of the questions you have to ask are, does the portal handle my type of company? Does it handle other issuers in the same industry? Are lots of investors on board? I mean, that's not an irrelevant question. Is the portal marketing itself aggressively? Remember, the portal itself is a startup. In fact, I think you can use crowdfunding to raise money to start a portal. A portal is a startup business just like anybody else. The SEC and FINRA registrations are very expensive and time-consuming, and I can see startup portals, niche portals being set up. to target specific communities and specific types of companies. I could see these people using crowdfunding to raise money for their efforts. I was out in Oklahoma City about 2.5 weeks ago giving a talk on crowdfunding to the State Bar Association out there, and during one of the breaks I was approached by a young gentleman who was the tribal council for one of the Native American tribes in Oklahoma, and he was looking to set up a portal specifically to assist Native American-owned companies. The nice thing about portals is you can create them for specific niches. For example, a portal for a certain region of the country, a portal for a certain type of people, female-owned, minority-owned businesses, a portal for a specific industry. There are so many ways you can slice and dice portals. And in fact, some of these niches have already developed. So, for example, there's a portal that deals with alternative energy projects. There is at least one portal that I'm aware of. It's called Sprigster, S-P-R-I-G-S-T-E-R, that is specializing in franchise startups. You may well see portals that are focused on the type of security. So, for example, you may see a portal for debt securities or real estate. There are a lot of real estate portals right now for real estate investments. ifunding.co is one, ifunding.co. You may find portals focusing in companies in specific states or offerings of a certain size. There are so many ways you can slice and dice portals. That's going to be the most interesting thing with crowdfunding, is seeing how the portal community develops. Okay, so let's say you decide to do a crowdfunded offering. You prepare a term sheet. You sell it to a portal. The portal is willing to accept your offering. You must prepare disclosure documents. There is a prescribed form for this, and it's not a paper form. It's an online questionnaire that you have to fill out. They did this really well. You must use an XML-based fillable form. Anybody who's ever done an online questionnaire, that's an XML-based fillable form. It's an asynchronous interview where they ask you questions and you respond in real time. There are required disclosures that you must make, basically the same that you would for a prospectus, for a private offering. I give a whole chapter on this in the crowdfunding hand. There's 31 required disclosures you must make, and rather than get involved here, I'll just refer you to the book. And then supplemental materials, you can throw in whatever you like. You can throw in marketing brochures. You can throw in videos. You can throw in product demonstrations. If you have a YouTube video showing how the prototype works, you can put that in. But everything has to be on the portal. Nothing can appear anything else. When you are doing an offering through a crowdfunded portal, all of the marketing materials and disclosure documents must be on the portal, and they cannot be anywhere else. You are required to have financial statements too. And the rules here are somewhat complicated, and there's a little trap in here you got to be very careful about. You have to include financial statements for your previous 2 years, or as long as the company has been around, if you're less than 2 years old. For offerings of $100,000 or less, they only need to be certified by the CEO or founder. Yep, I've looked at these financials and they look okay. For offerings between $100,000 and $500,000, they must be reviewed by an independent CPA. And for offerings of $500,000 to $1 million and the first-time offering, they must also be reviewed by an independent CEA. If the offering is more than $500,000 and it's a second or third offering, it must be audited by a CPA, and that's a big, big difference. Reviewed financials mean I looked at the numbers, I kicked the tires a little bit, nothing here appears wrong to me. Audited financials are, I have looked into every single number, and these numbers are 100% accurate. I guarantee that. That's what an audited financial statement is. CPAs and accounting firms do not give away audited financial statements. They charge a bloody, bloody fortune to audit financial statements. So you see the trap here. Let's say that you want to raise, let's say that you raise $300,000, And let's say that your offering goes really well. Your CPA reviews your financials, everything goes great, and you sell out within 30 days. You had a massive hit on your hands. You did a 6-month offering, but you hit the 300,000 target in 30 days. You're going to be very tempted to go back to the market for another 300, 400,000 at that point. But once you go over 500,000, you now have to have audited financials. So my advice to clients is going to be, if you're looking to raise between $500 and $1 million, do that in your first offering. Do a min-max. We're looking to raise between $100 and $800,000 or $200 and $800,000, over the next 6 months. That way, if you have a hit on your hands, you can still fall within that first time offering requirement where your financial statements only need to be reviewed. You will not have to do audited financials. If you undershoot and then go over 500,000, you're going to have audited financials. That's a trap. We call it a trap for the unwary. This is a very long slide.
Hey, Cliff, it's
Yep.
Steve here. Just be aware of the time, and we do have
Yes, I am.
4 or 5 questions. So there you go.
Yep,
okay,
and I know this is kind of a long topic. I may need another 5 minutes just to get things done, but I'm willing to go over another 5 minutes to answer questions. So that's not an issue. On this slide, the only point that
let's just plan then. We'll go to 105. So I'll go ahead.
That's fine.
Yep,
that's fine. I can do that. And there's a lot to talk about here. Really, I wrote a whole book on this stuff. So if anybody who wants to know step by step what the rules are for doing an offering, they can simply look at the book. The most important thing on this slide here is that the offering must be around for at least 21 days. You can make changes. You can correct things if you make a mistake. But there are specific rules. You must give the portal enough time to notify investors and give them a chance to bow out. The most important thing about marketing an offering here, and this is if there's one thing you want to take away from this presentation, the key to success in crowdfunding is going to be your ability to leverage your existing social network. If you do not have an existing social network, it's going to be very hard for you to crowdfund. This is initially, at least, the companies that will do best in crowdfunding are those that have large followings on social media. But you have to be very careful. All marketing activities must happen through the portal or through an announcement, which is like a tombstone ad. The SEC has very specific rules for what this looks like. You can send it to anyone, but all communications must happen on the portal. All communications must happen on the portal. You cannot promote the offering on your website. The only thing you can do is put up the announcement, the tombstone ad, and direct viewers to the portal. You cannot answer emails from investors from your website. You have to do it all through the portal. The good news is on the portal, you can market like hell. You can do whatever you want. The SEC lets you do that. But everything must happen on the portal. You can't do it anywhere else. Here are the rules for the offering announcement. If you've ever seen these ads in the Wall Street Journal where they just ask, name, rank, and serial number, that's basically what the offering announcement should look like. You can do whatever you want to on the portal, but nowhere else. And then let's say that your offering is successful. Let's say you do it, you raise $500,000, and now you've got 150 investors in your startup company. You can't just blow these people off and say, thank you, we'll call you when something happens. If you do, they will sue you. It's that simple. You now are an investor relations person. Part of your day, every day, is going to be managing your crowd. These people are going to send you emails every day, text messages. How are we doing? How's my investment coming? How are you doing? Are you doing this? Hey, I just saw an article in the Wall Street Journal. Are you taking advantage of that? You're going to need to devote someone on your management team full-time to doing that. You've got to keep your investors informed. You're going to start using quarterly conference calls. You're going to start doing webinars just like the one that I'm doing right now, telling your investors, keeping them informed, because otherwise they get antsy. They start developing, pitchforks. They start finding pitchforks and torches, and the next thing you know, the revolution is on. If things need to change, if you realize you made a mistake, you really should be in the yogurt business and not the technology business. You're going to have to learn how to pivot and break the bad news to these people. Here are some of the people you have to watch out for. I have a whole chapter on these people that waste your time. Very often, some of your crowdfunded investors may work for competing companies. There are people who know everything, including possibly myself. And the Che Guevaras, these are the people who want to launch the revolution when they don't like when they don't like what's going on. This is just a quick slide on real estate crowdfunding. Title II of the Jobs Act, that's the one that says that you can do a private offering to anybody and pitch it to anybody as long as accredited investors only are admitted. This has transformed the real estate industry. A lot of real estate developers are doing Title II deals, and I think Title III will also be popular too for smaller projects. Any of you on the call who are looking to flip houses and do stuff like that, Title III crowdfunding could be a way to build that kind of a business. Here are my own predictions, and then we'll start taking some questions. This is something that is brand new. Nobody, including me, knows how this is going to play out. No one knows how it is. Right now, we're waiting for a lot of portals to be registered, and then people will start doing offerings. My prediction is that for the next few months, we're going to see a flurry of portal registrations, but then the industry will fragment, and specialized niche portals will become the norm. And that's where you'll go. So if you're starting up a franchise or looking to franchise an existing business, you'll go to a portal that specializes in franchise offerings. That's how it's going to break down. Traditional crowdfunding platforms are not going away. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, you can still do traditional crowdfunding. This is not taking the place of the traditional project-oriented crowdfunding. But what I think will happen is that Kickstarter and Indiegogo eventually will get into this business, but they will either partner with an existing broker-dealer or portal, or they're going to stay out of the industry. Is what's going to happen. The early portals are going to be standalone independents. But like in any industry, there'll be consolidation. There'll be a dust-settling period of, my prediction is 3 to 5 years, with perhaps some case law. I mean, I am not a plaintiff's lawyer, but I have heard people say that crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding is going to be the biggest boon to plaintiff's lawyers since asbestos and mesothelioma. That may turn out to be true. I hope it doesn't play out that way, but it could very well be. But I think we will see some case law in the very early years clarifying what issuers and portals have to do to their clients and what their responsibility is to investors. And then last but not least, though, I am something of an evangelist for crowdfunding. Obviously, I wrote a 600-page book, so I think I have to be, whether I like it or not. But I do think that crowdfunding will become extremely popular for non-traditional issuers, especially as the millennial generation gets older and becomes the dominant force in our economy. I hate to generalize, and please, I don't want to sound at all like I'm generalizing or stereotyping, but I think one statement that you can make about the millennial generation that I think is very accurate is these people grew up hating banks and Wall Street. These are the people who think that the people who ran the banks back in the aughts that created the last financial crisis should be serving jail time. They are not fans of the traditional way of Wall Street doing business, and they're going to be looking for ways to change it and to work around the traditional Wall Street and banking structure that our economy currently has. Crowdfunding will be one of a number of tools, I think, that will be very attractive to that generation as they launch their startups. So after a rocky start, I do believe that equity crowdfunding is going to be the way that people in the next 5 to 10 years will be raising capital for their companies. So those are my prepared remarks. I apologize for racing through some of those slides, but most of them duplicate chapters in my book. If you really want a step-by-step guide to doing a crowdfunded offering, I would just simply suggest that you spend $20 of your hard-earned money, buy my book, and I've even got forms in there of term sheets and things like that that you can use when approaching portals. So let us open up to the forum to questions, Steve.
Yeah, great, Cliff. Thanks on that. Trying to put 600-page book into a 1-hour webinar is definitely a challenge, but you did a great job.
Well, thank you. Well, it helps if you talk very, very fast. That's the key.
Yeah, well, it doesn't hurt. So let me get a couple questions in here before, and we will stop at 1:05. So here's a question from Joe. He says, could there be any impact with future funding raised through traditional VCs if your initial fundraising was crowdfunding?
And the answer is yes, and that is why the answer is absolutely yes, Steve. And that's why I said before, I feel that at least initially, tech startups are not going to be very attractive to crowdfunding because their advisors are going to all be scaring them, telling them, hey, if you do a crowdfunded offering now and you bring 100 people on board, it's going to be really hard for you to get serious venture capital down the road when you really need it. Let's hold off. Let's do maybe we'll do a Title II for accredited investors only, but keep your options open because the venture capital community is not going to like investing in companies that have a lot of players on the field. That's why I suggested that if you're going to do a crowdfunded offering, make sure you set up a mechanism so you can buy these people out down the road. You don't want to have to pass on a $5 million investment because you raised $100,000 via crowdfunding when you first launched.
Yeah, great answer. Even I understood it. So here's a different one from Roz. There's something called a least amount, L-E-A-S-T amount. Why is there a certain time frame to raise a least amount?
That's a very good question, actually. And the short answer is I really don't know. But it is traditional. Most traditional private offerings are only for a limited place of time, and they are limited by time. And let's face it, that makes a certain amount of common sense, too. Would you invest in a company that has been trying to raise $100,000 for the last 5 years? I mean, at some point you have to kind of bite the bullet and say, you know what, this is an idea whose time is never going to come. So I do think that it is traditional, and I do like the idea of the fact that, hey, if you can't get this kind of excitement within a certain few months, well, then maybe you're just not right for the marketplace. Maybe you're not quite ready to grow up quite yet. Come back a little bit later when you're a bit more grown up, and we'll take a second look at you.
Yeah.
I think that's also too. Keep in mind that if an offering is indefinite, the portal has to hold on to the money indefinitely, and they are not going to want that liability. At some point, the investors are going to start screaming for interest on that, and the portals don't want to become a bank.
Yeah. All right. Also from Roz, what's the difference between the GoFundMe and Cabbage concepts?
Cabbage is very different. GoFundMe is a crowdfunding portal. They've been doing project crowdfunding for about 10 years. Cabbage is much different. Cabbage is primarily a lender that lends money to you based on accounts receivable and inventory and that kind of thing. There are a lot of companies out there that don't have a lot of equipment or bank collateral, but they do have very strong cash flows, accounts receivable turnover, and inventory turnover, and that's the kind of financing that Cabbage does. I do not know. Actually, I know some of the Cabbage people personally. They're very active in the eBay and Amazon communities, as I am, and I don't know what their plans are for crowdfunding. That's a very good question. The next time I'm in touch with the people at Cabbage, I may ask them if they're planning to launch a portal. They might be an ideal candidate, especially for online retail businesses that don't have a lot of physical collateral but have strong cash flows. That could be a good example of a niche portal.
Okay. Good. I hope these answers are hitting the mark. Let's see here. There's also a question about a benefit corporation.
Oh, good. I'm glad somebody asked this. The answer is a benefit corporation, just for people who don't know. Connecticut just passed a law about a year and a half ago allowing these. A benefit corporation is a for-profit corporation, a for-profit business that elects to also serve a social purpose or a social mission, such that when the directors are deciding what to do, they must take into account both the needs of their shareholders and the social purpose, the social mission of the company. I think that benefit corporations would be excellent candidates for crowdfunding because at the end of the day, crowdfunding is all about selling. It's all about sales. It's all about selling a sizzle. the most successful project crowdfunded offerings are those where the promoters are able to get to pull on people's heartstrings and people's emotions. The couple who's having trouble conceiving a baby that want money for artificial insemination, the person who needs a surgical procedure and he can't get insurance to cover it. There's a lot of that goes on in project crowdfunding, and to some extent, the company that tells the best story is the one that is most likely to attract investment, which is why I talk about the wowie zowie companies. Companies that have a wow factor to them are going to have a lot easier time doing crowdfunding, at least initially, at least in the early years until this becomes more accepted. So I think benefit corporations that have a social mission would be excellent candidates. The only thing is, though, because they are not nonprofits, benefit corporations are for-profit, they cannot offer people the opportunity to get a tax deduction for their donations. That they cannot do. In fact, if I'm a portal dealing with a benefit corporation, I want to make sure that that is clearly disclosed to investors, that you will not get any tax benefits for your investment. You're buying stock in a for-profit company just as the same as you would with IBM or Microsoft or Facebook. This is a for-profit venture. This is not nonprofit. It's just that, and in fact, because of the social mission, it's very possible that your return on investment may be lower than it would be for a company that does not have a social mission. I think that is a disclosure that would probably have to be made. I could do a whole program on benefit corporations, and if SCORE is interested, I'd be very happy to put one together on that. So benefit corporations are an entirely new and different animal, and we're trying to wrestle, all of us as lawyers, with how those are going to play out.
All right, good. Hey, I think we've had a lot of requests from the participants about when the slides and if the slides and the audio will be available. And I've responded to some of you individually, but let me just say yes, at scorefairfieldcounty.org sometime in the next 5 to 7 days, and click on workshops, and then you can just drive it from there. So click on workshops. Webinars are technically a part of workshops. So I think that's all we've got the time for today. As we just
I think so. Let me just mention too, for those of the audience who are Cliff Enico groupies, I also have a YouTube channel with about 35 videos up on all kinds of topics relating to small business and investment. That program that I did for the Oklahoma Bar Association on crowdfunding, which is really more for lawyers than the general public, but that's also up there in audio format too. If you go to youtube.com and type in Cliff Enico in quotes, you'll see all the videos that I've got up there. Some really cool stuff.
If you do say so yourself. All right, Cliff, hey, I'm just kidding you. Thank you very, very much for this. This is very informative. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody in the group did. We had about 45 people on, so it's great. And to all those of you that did participate, thank you very much for that. And again, reminder, July 12th, next webinar, Basic Technology Trends, where we're going to try to make this really simple, really impactful, and not get into a lot of the nits and bits and stuff like that sometimes can be intimidating. So please go on our site, and sign up for that webinar. So that's all for now. Thanks again for joining, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.